Hello, it's your teacher, Cary Fridley, and I am here to introduce the next section of the ebook for you for music appreciation. We are moving into part 6, and this is 20th century modernism. So we're leaving behind the Romantic era, and with the change in the century came a lot of new inventions and actual modernism in society in many different ways, and the music reflects that. So the Prelude 6 for part 6 is called Making Music Modern. So what were they trying to do? How did they reflect that in the music? Chapters we'll cover will be chapters 52 through 61. So this PowerPoint will give an introduction, broad overview to these chapters, and then it's up to you to get in there and read each one and complete the ebook activities for each chapter that is assigned in the schedule. And then you'll know all about 20th century modernism in music. So if you'll click the next slide, we can get started with the PowerPoint. Making music modern. Let's take a look at the timeline. Starting around 1900 and ending around 1950. So some world events. 1905, Albert Einstein introduces his theory of relativity. 1913, the Russian composer Igor Stravinsky, his ballet, The Rite of Spring, shocks Paris. They thought it was too modern. They rioted in the streets. They hated it. And when we listen to it now, it's hard to see. It's not so bad for our modern ears. 1914, First World War begins. The U.S. enters in 1917. 1919, the 18th Amendment. Prohibition passes. 1920, the 19th Amendment, women's suffrage passes. Women get the right to vote. 1922, Alban Berg's opera Wozzeck premieres. 1924, George Gershwin writes Rhapsody in Blue. Now, I'm going to just put it in here. 1920 to 1930 is the jazz age all over the world. But it starts in America, born in New Orleans, and the jazz age in the 1920s comes out of Harlem and New York. And this influences all the music that comes after it, including classical music. So that deserves mentioning. And then in 1929, it all came crashing down. The Great Depression begins. 1933, the WPA, Works Progress Administration, offers jobs to Harlem Renaissance writers and artists. So these were the poets and artists during the jazz age in Harlem that helped bring about this new wave of thought. 1936, Billie Holiday records Billie's Blues. 1939, Second World War begins. The U.S. enters in 1941. And also in 1939, the film La Noche de los Mayas, score by Sylvester Revueltas. I think I was right the first time. Revueltas, I don't know. Sorry, I'm unfamiliar with this. Celebrates Mayan culture. I need to watch that film. 1945, first nuclear weapon tested. Also in 1945, collaboration between Aaron Copland and Martha Graham results in the ballet Appalachian Spring. So what are modernisms? A self-conscious attempt to make art modern. So brand new. Creative vision, progressive directions. It's the opposite of classicism. Not drawing from tradition. Departures from tradition, making art new. Multiple musical modernisms. People had different ideas about what modern is. Rejections of 19th century models. Out with the old, in with the new. Suspicion of mass culture. If everybody likes it, it must not be good. Modernists grappled with vernacular traditions. So the idea that French music should sound French and be in French. Doing things how they've always done them. Modernists didn't like that. Early modernist art, so 1890 to 1940, two influential arts movements were Futurism and Dadaism. So Futurism, there was a 1909 manifesto, and it described alienation from established institutions, and here are some modernist paintings. So on the left, abstract art, an abstraction of African sculpture, strongly influenced European art. And on the right, from Henri Rousseau, 1844 to 1910, he found his subject matter in distant places. And this one is called The Sleeping Gypsy, and it was painted in 1897. Here's some more early modern art. At the top we have Girl Running on a Balcony, painted in 1912 by the futurist painter Giacomo Balla, who lived from 1871 to 1958. He experiments with how art can portray movement. Completely new idea. And at the bottom we have Pablo Picasso. His use of vibrant colors and bold overlapping shapes in mandolin and guitar from 1924 looks beyond Cubism toward the Surrealist school. So continuing on with modernist arts movements. Number 3, Dadaism from Switzerland in 1916. A reaction to horrors of war. Works of absolute absurdity. Simplicity of child's worldview. A commentary on the absurdity of war. Dada group merged into Surrealism. Explored the world of dreams. What is real and what is not? Other styles, Cubism, Paris-based geometric patterns. And Pablo Picasso painted some paintings in the Cubist style. Also Expressionism, which had an impact on music. And there are new styles referred to as avant-garde. It's a French military phrase. Breaking social and artistic conventions. So completely new. Distinguished from high culture and mass market taste. So kind of an underground feel to it, avant-garde. Musical markets in the United States. The music business gets started, and New York City is the center of it. Emphasis on marketplace, distinct American musical traditions. First, it's sheet music, and then it turns into recordings. Minstrel shows gave way to vaudeville. These were the traveling shows of the late 1800s, originating from European traditions. In Amadeus, they have the People's Theater. To me, that reminded me of a minstrel. Or a vaudeville in Europe. And in America, they were traveling shows, and everyone would want to buy the music from the shows. So New York City, prolific center of music publishing. Prolific means producing a lot. In New York City, we had Tin Pan Alley, which is a street in Manhattan where all the songwriters worked, creating these melodies. It was all part of Broadway musicals that were popular, and then the shows would go out on the road. It was called Tin Pan Alley because if you walked down the alley with all the pianos banging at the same time, it sounded like people were hitting tin pans. It sounded a cacophony. Popular music writers and publishers set up business. Irving Berlin was the most successful Tin Pan Alley composer. He had the most hits, all before recordings, but it transitioned pretty easily to the recording industry in the 1920s when that came about. Here is another modernist painting. Spanish artist Joan Miró, 1893 to 1983, explores the surrealist world of dreams through the distortion of shapes. This one's called Dutch Interior 1. Between Two Wars, Music in the Great Depression. So the Great Depression starts at the end of 1929. So before that, everything was wonderful. Roaring 20s, growth of radio and film, Harlem Renaissance celebrated African American culture. And this is literally in Harlem. It was a group of philosophers and thinkers trying to imagine a new life for the African American community. And they decided what they should focus on first is art. So poetry and paintings were how they communicated these ideas. It's wonderful stuff if you want to check it out. And this is the community where the Harlem jazz scene was the soundtrack for the Harlem Renaissance. And that started in the teens, but in the 1920s, the Roaring 20s, it was really rocking. And that's also known as the Jazz Age. Then comes the Great Depression. Tin Pan Alley faded, the booming business in New York. Jazz clubs, films, Broadway musical theaters offer brief escape. Big band jazz dominated popular music. In World War II, musicians toured with the USO, and patriotic songs were popular, like Irving Berlin's God Bless America. God bless America, land that I love. Do you guys know that one? Here's some popular art from right before the Jazz Age. And this was when the sheet music was popular. From the minstrel shows. So on the left is the cover of sheet music. So sheet music is a short song that you can play on the piano. The genre is called parlor songs, and they were popular in America. So your piano's in the parlor, and that's how you would socialize. Someone would play the piano, and you would sing these fun songs that were short and easy and catchy. And that's what Tin Pan Alley produced. And it easily translated to short, fun, catchy records you could buy. So on the left, we have the cover to the sheet music of Over There, from the First World War. On the right, a vaudeville show from 1917, watercolor painting. So a vaudeville show is like a variety show with a series of acts, duos and trios and dancers and comedians. So this is a scene from a vaudeville show in 1917. Now, the Jazz Age couldn't have happened without the Flappers. The Flappers are the young feminists in the cities that cut their hair and wore short dresses and went out dancing and drank bootleg liquor during Prohibition and smoked cigarettes. And these were the women that got the right to vote in 1920. And they said, we're going to do what we want. We're not going to be the demure housewife. And that feminine energy really fueled the jazz age, because when the girls are dancing, the music just wants to keep everybody out there dancing. So here is a painting of the Charleston dance craze. The Charleston dance is the dance where they swing the girl around, and it's really energetic, and it's early jazz dance. It's the roots of the beat and the dance are from Charleston, South Carolina, just so that you know. So this painting, it looks surrealist to me. It's called Metropolis from 1928 by Otto Dix, who lived from 1891 to 1969. Features of early musical modernism. So how did they represent modernism in music? Rhythmic complexity, non-symmetrical patterns. So remember our first discussion forum about symmetry. So what is more new than not using symmetry? Changing meter. Shift constantly between the piece. Go from 4/4 to 2/4 to 5/4 to 6/8. Polyrhythm. Complex rhythmic patterns used simultaneously. So like polyphony, but with rhythms. Achieved complexity of Asian and African rhythm. Material from popular styles, ragtime and jazz. So jazz is a combination between European influences and African influences that developed over hundreds of years in America and came out in New Orleans around the turn of the century. So there is a lot of African influence. So classical music, if they want to be new, then they need to dip into cultures that they haven't used before. And that's African music, which wasn't written down. Traditional African music, not written down. So that's a whole new way to change how you make classical music. And Asian music has another whole nother world of possibilities that don't fit into the classical ideals that have come before. So I just want to stress again how important jazz was for all music. And in the 1920s, it really changed everything all over the world. So one of the most important developments in 1920 was radio. People could have a little transistor radio and listen to music and all kinds of things, broadcast from far, far away, because there weren't any limits to the signal that you could put out. There weren't regulations, and there weren't zillions of radio stations like there are now. There were just a handful. So you could everyone could listen to the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night. Everyone in America. Everyone could listen to the ballroom in New York on Saturday night, the jazz band live. So it really must have been an exciting time for everyone. With Europe on the brink of entering the Second World War, Kate Smith's 1938 radio broadcast of God Bless America stirred strong nationalist sentiments at home. The new melody and harmony. Melody not conceived vocally. So traditionally, melodies emulated song, especially in the Romantic era. Soaring melodies, like someone singing a song from the highest mountaintop. And so in modernist music, not thinking about it like a song, going from whichever note you want to whichever note you want to. Wide leaps, dissonant intervals, rejected balanced phrase repetition. So no more call and response. I'm going to keep going because you will hear it in the listening examples. The harmony, how things work together, highly dissonant, meaning the sounds clash. Traditionally, they're considered not going well together. So now, if we're going to do something new, let's make the clash the new good thing. Let's use tension a lot. Polychords, stacked chords, more notes added. Polyharmony, two or more streams of harmony. So extension or replacement of major minor system. Atonality, elimination of harmonic center, led to serialism, 12-tone technique. Atonality means you don't have the scale anymore. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You use chromaticism, which is all 13 notes, all half steps. So you don't have push and pull anymore. Every scale degree is equal. So no more tension and release through wavelength dissonance. They would use it in different ways. So serialism is patterns using series. And 12-tone technique is what I was describing, where, 12-tone technique is where you take the scale, all the half steps. You think there's 13, but the top is the same as the bottom. So C and C, do all the little half steps, you get 12. 12-tone technique, they would make a scale. Schoenberg did this, where you mix the notes up however you want to make your scale. No longer from low to high. Like beep, boop, beep, boop, boop, beep, 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 doop, boop, boop. And that would be your scale. And then he would write music in the same way J.S. Bach wrote music, but using this scale that didn't go from low to high. And that is some modern music, let me tell you. So if that sounds interesting to you, you might want to check out Schoenberg 12-tone compositions. Here's a modernist painting. I would say this is serialism. It's a repeated series. The infinite looping and interlacing of colorful circles in Robert Delaunay's endless rhythm is suggestive of the new rhythmic energy of the modernist movement. And he lived from 1885 to 1941. And this painting is from 1934. Orchestration. So what is orchestration? That is what instruments you are in the orchestra and how you pair them together. So you make new colors by, say, I'm going to have the violins and the clarinets and the triangle play together. Make a new color. So in modern classical music, the orchestration used a smaller orchestra with a leaner, brighter sound. This is during the rise of the woodwind quintet. Instrumental color brings out counterpoint. So, using different distinctive colors will let you hear how the instruments are interacting with each other more clearly. Strings are no longer the heart of the orchestra. The attention is on the woodwinds. Emphasis on rhythm and percussion. And the piano joined the orchestra, which I think would only work if the orchestra was smaller, because it might get drowned out in a big romantic orchestra. This is a photograph. Irregular lines and sudden leaps comparable to those found in early modernist melodies characterize this vista from Arches National Park in Utah. So, if these rocks were a melody, the modernist would like it. Here are two images. The top is a minimalist painting. Intersecting lines and bold blocks of color mirror modernist orchestration in this work. Composition in red, yellow, and blue, 1937 to 1942, by Pierre Mondrian, who lived from 1872 to 1944. So the top painting mirrors modernist orchestration. I will ask you, how do you think that? Well, one thing I can see is using the three primary colors. They are the most contrasting colors. They are bright and stick out, and that's what they wanted with the instruments, to emphasize how they interact. And the pattern of the black and white lines is rhythmic. And black and white, to me, it's more of a clear pattern than with the colors. So I'm going to take a leap and say that represents the percussive rhythms, like on-off, non-pitch rhythms. All the percussionists out there, you're thinking, we do play pitches. But to me, it makes me think about the rhythm. And underneath, we have a composer playing his experimental gourd tree and cone gongs. Harry Parch. How did performance practice change for the modernist music? So, a modernist gesture. Composers seek dispassionate clarity. So completely different than trying to move your emotions or maybe blow your mind like the late romantic composers. They seek dispassionate clarity, unemotional, and just music. Inspiration from 20th century technological innovations. So music like a machine. Division between musicians. Preserving tradition. Sort of drawing a line around it, I feel like. Specializing in avant-garde approaches. Fascinating. I really like modern music. I love the creativity behind it.